Hello. Our presentation, I'm Katheran Gingrich and my partner is Kenelty. And our presentation we chose to research on was the staffing shortages in schools.
So I'm going to share my screen really quick with you guys on the presentation that we created for you all. So the problem that we chose was staffing shortages, and then how a lack of educational professionals affect the learning environment for all of the students. So our problem is that staffing shortages are evident nearly everywhere in the, education world due to the lack of enthusiasm for a profession that is observed as rewarding. So some problems that teachers have shared and that we did our research on was that more people are going into STEM careers. This is due to the lack of professionalism that they see in this job. It's underpaid, the support that teachers are getting isn't enough for them, and then the student debt coming out of college going into a job that is so lacking in funding.
Okay, so I am going to go through my research. So first of all, we have a piece by Loretta Mason Williams, Elizabeth Bettini, David Payton, and Alexandria Harvey, Michael Rosenberg, and Paul T. Sindeller. So a lot of authors. And this piece was titled Rethinking Shortages in Special Education, Making Good on the Promise of an Equal Opportunity for Students with Disabilities. So basically, this article was all about how there's so many special education teacher shortages and how those shortages have ultimately failed the students because it's really hard for the students to adapt to constant change, and they're also not getting all the resources and opportunities that they usually should. So that is my first piece of evidence. My second that I used is by Mary T. Brownell and Paul T. Sindeller, and it is on preparing and retaining effective special education teachers, systematic solutions for addressing teacher shortages. And this source was created in 2016, and it gave a lot of lists of what special education teachers were facing in terms of challenges. And then it also listed off several things that we could do, or administrators, or even the school itself could do to help support those special education teachers to hopefully close the gap. And they called it a systemic approach because it does require a solution, and the teaching shortage is just something that's not going to go away quickly. Now, my third piece of research is a piece that was actually a dissertation that I enjoyed reading. So it was by Cynthia Lodwick Armstrong, and it was a principles perceptions, the influence of administrative preparation on special education teachers. So this piece went through and described all of the challenges that administrators are seeing with special education teachers, and not only the lack, but the training that they go through, because we're seeing that they are, with the increased inclusion, it's harder to find the highly qualified special education teachers because they're just not going through the programs like they were. And ultimately, it just goes through and explains how administrators further need to work with their teachers to train and collaborate. My fourth piece of evidence that I found is a journal titled Career Choices of Recent Doctorates in Special Education, Their Implications for Addressing Faculty Shortages. This was actually written quite a while ago, but I found it to be very relevant for today because it discussed why there's such a shortage in faculty for special education teachers, and gave some great data on what everyone else is going into. It also discusses why like some very specific reasons as to why people aren't going into the profession anymore. And then my last piece of evidence was actually a project proposal written in 2017, and it was Understanding and Addressing Teacher Shortages in the United States. It's called the Hamilton Project by Thomas S.D. and Dan Goldhaber. And the entire point of the project is to introduce a bill and get more funding and support schools as much as possible so that they are successfully implementing special education teachers and providing with the best education possible. And now we're going to switch over to Brooklyn.
Okay. So my first piece that I chose to write about or research on, all of these sources I got from, where did I start? Okay, so all of these sources were gotten from the Carroll Library. So my first source is, where are all the male teachers? So this one was very interesting because usually, historically, it has been a woman's role to go into the classroom and be the teacher as the men go out and work. However, the times are changing and education should change with it. So I chose to do the piece on where are the male teachers. Many teachers that are male promote that good role model for a boy student coming into your classroom, and some students do not have a male in their family. So when they go into the schools, having that male teacher there, showing them how to use respect, how to be that role model, it has seen great growth for students. And so that was just a really cool piece to read about. So my next piece is, unions must share the blame for teacher shortages. The unions blame the government for the worst teacher shortages, but Connor Ryan, who has experienced teacher militancy firsthand, says the unions are making matters worse. So this was very interesting to read about. It kind of like changed the pace of why teachers are going in. They have that shortage of pay. It kind of broke it down into poor discipline, low pay, too much work, and low morale. The governmental issue is on the poor discipline. So many students are coming in with little to no discipline in the classroom, and that makes it harder and tougher for those teachers in the classroom. However, the three other sources, low pay, too much work, and low morale, is what Ryan blamed on the unions. So it was, as the unions fight for this, they are deterring potential recruits by exaggeration of this low pay. They are, in all likelihood, lowering that morale, that the job should instead be promoted so that that teacher shortage can come to a halt instead of keep inclining. So to end, it stated, instead of turning potential recruits off teaching, might now be a good time for unions to join forces with the recruiters to attract more people into the profession and to help keep those who are already there. That would be in the best interest of their members. So in the seventh source that I chose, it was teacher shortage expected to intensify. So going back into some more reasons for this. So Seltzer wrote, the commission also is looking at incentives and alternative paths to certification for people who are in other lines of work but may want to be teachers. Making it a job that people may not have thought about before would be something to look into. I think that that is pretty good looking back into it, giving those incentives to bring more people into this and maybe less intensifying that teacher shortages that is projected. In my next source, it is Why more teachers want to leave the profession. Statewide districts scrambling to keep teachers in the classroom. So this is a headline that I saw in most of my research. It gave real world situations that stated certain problems, and then it had numbers to back it up and prove it. It talked about the harsh, demanding environment that these educators encountered. And then in our class, we talked about collaboration and building strong relationships. These school districts may want to go back to those basics to retain the teachers instead of deterring them and leaving them to ultimately unemployment. My last article was why young teachers leave the profession. An excessive workload can be a trigger for the early departure. It's also true that many young teachers don't expect teaching to be a lifelong career, a notion from the dusty past. Fast promotions and new challenges are the aims for some new teachers. That said, having adequate support and guidance are key factors in determining whether new teachers will stick with it or quit. These supports include an extensive induction program, not just 1 or 2 days for teachers to comprehend their new school environment, but also mentoring from qualified and committed colleagues is a must. Poor student behavior is also a current concern for many beginning teachers. So this was a quote that I pulled out, and going into this future profession myself, I found this very alarming. They were things that we talked about in our book, listing them off, going into those inductive programs, having that qualified colleague to help you along as you go into your first years. So it was just going again to that school environment where many challenges that they face daily, the preparation that they have for the job, and teachers need to feel prepared. They need to feel supported and ready for the task ahead because it is difficult. It is rewarding, like people say, but it is difficult every day. And if we do not, that low retention rate will potentially be even greater as we go along. So going into our methods. So first was our method on collaboration. And this was communication via email and video call. We made sure that we agreed on things before we met just to make that more efficient. And then our productivity and attitude was very positive. We were pretty fast paced moving forward. We set our goal, we knew what it was, and we got things done. Something that held us back, as we read about in our book too, was time constraints. It is the summer, we were working through things, but we ultimately made it work in the end and came out with a good product, I believe. So for our research, we chose 5 sources each, and you heard us talk about those. We each talked about our 5 that we brought to the table, and then in our research paper, brought them all together for that collaboratory piece. So we focused on scholarly information, pulling from pieces that were sources that we cited at the end. And that was mostly secondary analysis as we put it into our paper. So we started out with broad topics. And so our topic was the teacher shortage. We looked at those different things, pulled out and narrowed down to more specific issues that we will talk about. Just looking back at the low pay that we get, the STEM careers that more people are going into, and just kind of coming up with solutions as we narrowed it down.
Okay. My piece I chose to focus on was results, and this was basically a lot of data that I pulled from all of our sources, including some outside sources, and it's very surprising the results that actually did come from this. So it is known, and most of the sources I read actually did state this, that 50% of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. They are new, they come in, and then within 5 years, they decide to leave the profession and never return as a teacher or even in the school setting. So that is very startling to realize that half of teachers actually do end up, for lack of a better word, quitting the teaching profession before they even really get started in their career. And then following up from that, less than 20% of position vacancies are from retiring teachers. Most of the position vacancies are from moving schools, leaving the profession, changing your job if you are, a grade school teacher and then moving to a different grade. That's a good example. But the position vacancies aren't from people retiring. The schools aren't losing people after 20 years. They're losing 30 years. They're losing people before they can even get started. And then 40% of graduates do not immediately enter the classroom. This means that they will either take a few years off or they'll decide that education wasn't even what they wanted to do. They'll finish student teaching, they'll graduate, and then not apply for any jobs. Some will move into paraprofessional positions, which is an entry into the professional world. But seeing that 40%, almost half of teachers not starting in the classroom right away, is a little unnerving, because where are they going and how are we going to replace the positions that we're losing? And then South Carolina actually saw the loss of 5,300 teachers from the profession during the 2017 and 2018 school year. And the total actually came out to over 7,000 teacher vacancies. So that's meaning teachers moving positions from school to school, anything like that. But they lost over 5,300 teachers overall from the profession. And that took a huge hit to the school system. Their hiring staff had to go on overdrive, and it's becoming a more common trend as time goes on. And then I also read that schools eligible for Title I programs see a 50% higher turnover rate. This had to do with higher poverty rates and overall socioeconomic status of the school. And then as of 2017, the teacher shortage sits at 8%. So that number is either higher or lower, but I do know that when they took this statistic in 2017, it had gone higher than previously, but was still not the highest we've ever seen it. So that is a little positive that the teacher shortage isn't as big as it has been, but it's still very large. And these are some graphs that I've pulled from sources. So the one over here, figure 3, this is from the Hamilton Project. It's percentage of difficult to fill teacher vacancies in certain school years. So you can see over here, back in 1990 to 91, they had the most trouble with SPED vacancies. And you can see that trend continues with special ed vacancies very highly all the way up until 2012, except for 2007, 2008, where there were STEM vacancies, and in 2011, 2012. So you can see that the elementary vacancies are the lowest, because they're just more open to people. More people are going into elementary education versus STEM. And it's like Brooklyn mentioned, people are choosing to go into STEM fields versus teaching STEM, which might lead to the shortage. And then I have this graph here, and it mentions the teacher shortage in the US, and it goes all the way from 0 to over 4,000 in 2015. And then in this graph over here, this is a career choices, and it just shows how teaching isn't the most popular career and it needs to be reversed.
Okay, so going on to our discussion. So in light of the research that we discussed, we feel that, supported by the data and the views of the people in the teaching profession, we have found a few solutions that may alleviate the future teacher shortage. So some of these problems are occurring in the system as of now, and we need to change that. So considering the problems that are occurring, We need to combat it, learn how to, and then provide the support that our teachers need. It's not going to be a simple task as we've been looking at the data, and it's going to take a change of mindset and attitude toward the overall education. So we need to bring back the sophistication and importance that this job holds, leading more people to be well educated, but wanting to educate others as well, leaving that education system and then giving back to it, being that teacher that can help lead another to a great STEM career or going back into education as well. Another factor is the accessibility of the teacher education program. This limits the amount of educators in the program. A big undertaking is the salary that this job holds. By raising this and adding more bonuses for experienced teachers, we believe that it will be able to gain more educators and bring back how important education really is. Lastly, focusing on providing an open and positive supportive school environment. This will promote collaboration and alleviate stress that pushes teachers away from the job and provide them with the support they need. This is the end of our presentation on teacher shortage. Here are our sources, and we hope that we put some positive solutions to this problem that we are facing right now, and for us as we go on to be future educators.
Thank you so much.